Greetings, welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we want to talk about Signal moving some of their features to the cloud, and this is an application I've used from my phone for a while, and I've kind of recommended it, but I'm starting to backtrack that, and since I don't know as much about all of the security and all of the privacy and other implications, I brought on Sean OBrien, who does know about all this kind of stuff, to bump some things back across to him. So how's it going, Sean?
Good, good. Happy to be here.
All right. And so you're working on some privacy.io is your one thing. Or is it no, not privacy.io. What's your system again? I'm sorry. I have
I've
too
changed
many
a lot
things
of
in my head.
URLs.
What's
It's okay.
that?
You had privacysafe.io.
Privacysafe.io. There's
Yeah,
also privacy.io, which is a good
yeah,
place to go to look for good privacy stuff. But privacysafe.io, which I still want to get your system and play around with a little bit.
yeah.
And then you're working on. Are you going to talk about your other project or not?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Sure,
I'll,
go
I'll
for
do
it.
a quick
Sure,
intro.
go ahead.
So, for people who don't know me, I'm a lecturer at Yale Law School. We do a cybersecurity class there. I also founded something called Yale Privacy Lab, where we do all kinds of cool stuff, but we look at the security of mobile apps primarily right now. Um, I also do digital self-defense workshops, and those are the latest thing that we'll be bringing online for Privacy Safe, and trying to make sure that we're bringing good quality privacy respecting remote education to people, especially while they're at home. So,
Yep, very good. Very definitely needed today. And we'll say hi to people on comments and we'll kind of jump on in and then we can kind of shoot the breeze until we run out of time. So
cool.
let's see. Klex Linux is on. Greetings, Moonbase Alpha Grace. Greetings, fellow Spaceling. How's it going? Haven't brought Roger over for a while. I gotta bring Roger over. See, Roger can jump on the screen. He's my alien, Sean. Um, Let's see. Aaron uses Arch, by the way. All right. Just installed a bunch of updates in Manjaro KDE via Discover. It's amazing how Manjaro has gone from being an absolute mess in February to being a decent platform I can rely on. Very good. All right. Has something to do with the kernel version. Very possible. Frosty Flakes. Greetings to you. Joseph, how's it going? KDE on both my machines have very stable. And you can head out privacy. Is it privacysafe.tech?
Yeah, that's the better
So
URL to
you dropped
use.
that one in
Yep.
there. Very good. Awesome. And Low Spec Linux Laptop says good morning. So good morning to you as well. Let me double check that my article view's up so people can see what we are looking at here as we go. So we want to talk about Signal. And for me, I have been highly annoyed for about, 2 months ago, they added this profile nag that you can't just say, hey, I'm not interested in profiles. I'm that guy that I wanted to use Signal to have good end-to-end encryption on my text messages for that reason. That's my target audience, and Signal is moving away from that. It would appear. What are your initial thoughts on this, Sean? Um,
Sure. So a little bit of history I think is important here. So Signal grew out of just like a lot of the encrypted messengers out there, grew out of the fallout from 2013 and the Snowden disclosures, right? And started off as really a combination of a couple other projects. But as you say, it was about encrypted text messaging and encrypted calling.
mhm.
Um, Signal decided to solve, or at least temporarily, kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, the authentication problem by using phone numbers.
Mhm.
So one of the traditional problems with these encrypted messengers is that you have to have an identity. Where do you store the identity? How do you have people reach out to other people for the first time? Right, making
Mhm.
first contact is really hard if you don't have a directory of some kind,
Yeah.
etc. So instead of doing that, Signal took the approach of saying, hey, let's keep it as simple as possible. We will just use phone numbers. We're going to look through
Mhm.
your address book on your phone, basically, and allow you to call anybody, who also has Signal
Mhm.
that's in your address book or that you know the
Correct.
phone number for.
Sure.
Um, so it started out that simple, and you're right, it has moved away from that. I think these features are a lot about, trying to come into parity with, the WhatsApps and the other apps that people are
Mhm.
using. Um,
Yeah.
and by the way, Open Whisper Systems, which is the group behind Signal, they also develop WhatsApp for Facebook. So, or at least the encryption parts of it. So,
Mhm. So there's a lot of discussion. So on that point there, I'll comment a little on that. Since I was specifically looking for a good means to simply do texting with people that I already generally know, I'm okay with that. I understand completely that a lot of people are concerned with having the phone numbers because I'm the same way, you know. One of the advantages of Telegram is that I can say, here's my user account, and then I don't have to provide my phone number. And I like that element of Telegram for that perspective. But where they started to kind of lose me is that I don't want WhatsApp or a WhatsApp-like service. I don't want a searchable directory. I don't want someone to be able to just search through and prospectively find me because I actually use my phone to communicate with people that I know or my business contacts, and I do not turn notifications on my phone. I do not want to be bothered by random people on my phone. That's not what I want to have. I have set times. I sit in front of the computer. That's the way and the time and the means to contact me. And so while they are indeed listening to a lot of their user base, I guess they're just going in a direction I personally am not interested in, albeit some of the directions that they're going are better for the demographics that do want a WhatsApp type device.
Yeah, and
So,
my feeling is they're not going to end up in a place where you have a searchable directory necessarily. It's just
mhm,
that discovery of users, if you have
mhm.
some of the information, might be
Yeah.
easier. So Wire is a good example. That's the messenger that I use that has usernames, has a directory system. I believe they just store that stuff as encrypted hashes, basically. So it's the as long as you don't hypothetically put private information in either a photo or the username, to use the example of Wire, these systems can be pretty private, but you're putting a massive amount of trust in the provider, and that's
Mhm.
really where the
Yeah.
issue happens. So I do agree with you. Signal's not there yet, though. I do think you're right. That's the direction they're moving in, and the stuff they've been rolling out this week is a sign of that.
Hmm.
So.
Yeah, and we'll get to what they're rolling out here this week in a bit. I thought that I had one more thing in my head. I should have written it down on my notepad here, so I didn't forget it. But I guess one of the other factors, yeah, that's right. One of the biggest concerns and biggest privacy concerns about Signal is every time somebody activates Signal, it will literally find every other person that's using Signal and ping them. And there's
Yeah.
actually a case, I think somebody had it in one of the reviews about it. I might have been on one of the Google Play reviews about it, where they're like, this actually gave my number to a crazy ex-wife or something. And it was like, that's a bad thing. So I completely disagree with Signal going, oh, hey,
Yeah.
here's a blast out to everybody else who's been using Signal. I think that that's a huge concern
I
personally.
hate
And
it. Yeah, it's a problem
yeah,
for me. Listen, you've got business contacts in your phone or somebody you just haven't talked to for a while or don't care to talk to, but you want to know who they are when they're calling, right?
exactly.
You
There
know,
are people in my address book specifically so I know not to pick up the phone.
right, right. So that's an issue. And I don't know where they got the idea to do. Obviously, that helps them grow their network quickly, right? So
Yeah.
it solves that purpose. But yeah, you would think that would be a huge problem, and especially for people with domestic abuse, like you said, exes and so on. I mean,
Mhm.
this could be a huge, huge issue. So yeah, yeah,
Excellent. So let's go ahead and jump on to what they did this week. So they introduced signal pins that basically, if I update my phone, update signal that my phone keeps on nagging me to update, I will be forced to input a pin.
yep.
And let's go over my basic understanding, and please correct me on the things that I don't that I have incorrect. From my understanding, they're not actually storing on the cloud the actual messages. They're not storing the copy of the phone calls that we do. What they are storing is they want to separate the contacts from your phone and put them on a separate contact specifically for Signal. The contacts will be stored, your profile information and settings will be stored. That is basically what they're storing. Did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong there?
Yeah, so right now, my understanding is with the pins, it actually is not even your contact information. It's just your profile settings, and then if you've had like group chat rooms, who was in
Mm-hmm.
that chat room, maybe the last thing they said. That I don't know for certain. But my understanding is there's some kind of persistence about group chat as well. The
Mm-hmm.
goal is, and they said it kind of generally in the blog post, to get to the point where the address book is also being stored and can be
Mm-hmm.
recovered by this PIN system,
Yes.
but they're not there yet. So
Yeah, that to me is a little bit of a concern. It's not as bad as storing my messages, but it is a little bit of a concern. Let's go ahead and just do a small parenthetical on this on the backup system. If you need to transfer signal to a new device, they've made this intentionally a pain.
right.
and, and the challenge with being intentionally a pain, like it's such intentionally a pain that even if you plug your phone in and manually move the files over, you can't do it because they store the file in a format that you have to use an ADB push and pull to actually grab the file. Like you have to pull it. You can manually copy it from your system and drop it into it if it's on your computer, but you have to pull it through from the terminal.
Yeah, but I find that to be a feature. Maybe I'm alone in that, but I mean,
maybe.
you know,
I get it. I do get it. That's not a hill I'm dying on. That's absolutely. I think because if we're using Signal and we understand what it is, hey, maybe you should know how to use a command line, just a little. But I don't know.
well, not even that, Tom. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Somebody asked just briefly, who's the guest? This is Sean O'Brien. If you catch the beginning, he has a long experience in education, in technology and stuff. So, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the feature part actually comes in with the fact that it is forgetful, right? It does get amnesia, so to speak. I like amnesia systems or whatever you're going to call them for security because you want to have something that the user needs to know that, hey, I have to be serious about copying and backing up the things that I need. And I can't think of a Signal chat window as a place to do that, right? As a place that should store my history.
What I'm talking about, though, is if I want to say, okay, I'm going to transfer, this phone's getting old. I'm going to put Signal on my new device. I'm going to go in. I'm going to make a backup. I'm going to make a backup so I can transfer all my messages and not lose my messages as I port it to a new device. Getting that backup off of your phone is excessively hard in ways that it should not be. That's what I'm talking about. The rest of what you said, I think we were talking about two different things, but absolutely. So
no, I agree. Yeah. If you back up the files on purpose, you should be able to export it, import it.
Correct. And you can't. You need to pull it off with a terminal command. Best I know. And that's like, so let's go ahead and look at this blog post here. Signal, our goal is to build a reliable, secure, and private communication experience that's broadly accessible and simple to use. From the beginning, we've designed Signal so your information is in your hands rather than ours. Currently, that happens to mean if your hands accidentally lose your phone to the toilet, your information is lost along with it. And I'm okay with that. I'm personally okay with losing that information to the toilet. No.
Yeah, so I mean, again, what's going on, and I'm sure, I mean, we haven't seen the numbers, but all these communication apps, all remote communication is blowing up right now, right? I am certain that Open Whisper Systems has more users than ever because of COVID-19, right? So what they are probably trying to do is introduce features that are going to embrace the community of people that are used to being able to recover stuff. But like I try to teach in the digital self-defense workshops and so on, I do think it's better to just treat these systems as, okay, it's trashed. I have to start over if I lose my stuff. And treat the stuff that you want to keep and back up and store as in a separate area and compartmentalize that part of your life. That obviously takes a little bit of not just resources, right? You need to have more than just one smartphone, which a lot of people only have one device, believe it or not, right? But you also need to have some discipline and some really thoughtfulness about it. And, I mean, a lot of folks, they want privacy, but they don't necessarily want to take those kinds of steps. Everybody's busy, everybody's working. I understand that, but you can't get around these fundamental problems. Now, the approach that Signal uses is pretty interesting. I'm sure you're going to go into it, so I'll let you keep reading. But yeah.
So, all right. So with the things that we've already mentioned, that could be more information you'd initially consider. We think private communication means more than just encrypted messaging. We've designed Signal accordingly. Signal provides private groups, private contact discovery, and private profiles. so etc. So all these things are exclusively in your hands, but as we move to additional features in the Signal community has asked for, like addressing that's not based on phone numbers and chatting with contacts that aren't saved in an address book, it means more and more important supporting data can also be lost. So that's kind of the direction. Going back to it, I completely understand what they're doing. They're just moving away from a model that I personally am interested in using it for, because it's not what I'm really interested in using my device for. I don't want to be bothered by on my phone, in other words, by a person that's not an immediate contact in my life. I have systems, plenty of systems in place to do that on the computer. And that way I can control my time better. And so with that, I do understand, because for a person looking for a WhatsApp type system or a Wire type system or Telegram type system, a username is a good thing. But if a person like me comes along and still wants to use your platform, you should give me the option to say, not interested ever. Stop.
Right.
And they don't have that. And that is the thing that's pushing me away.
Yeah, so the model is a familiar one, right?
Yeah.
We trust intermediaries, right? We trust web servers, and rather than having something that is completely, more of what we think about when we think about peer-to-peer or decentralized systems, right? This is starting to creep more and more into the world of Open Whisper Systems has access to this stuff potentially. Now, they do some really good work with encryption, I think, to get around that, but I'd still worrisome from a couple of perspectives, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a good question here directly related to Signal. Can it replace your SMS app and or address book? SMS app, yes. Address book, no. Although my understanding is they're kind of moving to the point where it can replace your address book, and that's one of the things they're moving to.
Yeah, and I would also recommend for Android folks who are interested in encrypted SMS, the best app for that right now is something called Silence, and you can use that without having to have an app installed like Signal. You would, in this case, obviously need to have the other users have Signal to send a text message to them. So
Signal or Silence?
Not with Silence, with Signal.
Okay.
The thing about Silence is it actually just generates a GPG key, so a key pair for the conversation. So you can use it for plain communication with, people who don't have encrypted SMS, but you can also set up a quick key exchange and then have an encrypted SMS conversation.
So based on everything I'm saying today, I should probably take Signal off and go to Silence.
Well, for text messaging, I actually have some other recommendations for you. It might be a good time to go into them.
Let's get this done. Can we finish Signal and then jump into that?
That makes sense.
So because the next paragraph is where I'm going to have you take over the conversation for a little bit, because I have no idea what secure value recovery is, and you do. So in the latest version of our apps, we're introducing Signal pins. This is the thing that's causing the controversy. Signal pins are based on secure value recovery, which we previewed in December to allow supporting data like your profile, settings, and those who you blocked to be securely recovered should you lose or switch devices. Pins will also help facilitate new features like addressing that isn't based exclusively on phone numbers, since the system address book will no longer be a viable way to maintain your network of contacts. So what is secure value recovery, and what does all this mean for us?
Sure. So again, back to that model, right? We're familiar with the idea that you have a service provider, they have some data, you lose your stuff, you have a PIN you provide them, and they can restore that stuff on a new device or in a new fresh install of the operating system, right? That we're familiar with. The secure value recovery is the name that Signal and the OWS people are using for their secure enclave, right? This is kind of analogous to what the iPhone does, right? With storing the encryption keys to unlock your phone or decrypt the disk on the iPhone. So if people are familiar with the FBI case and all of what's went on with the San Bernardino situation, it is very difficult to get encrypted information out of these secure enclave systems. And specifically, the one that Signal has that they're calling secure value recovery is based on something called Intel SGX. That's a feature that is supposed to keep the computation from even being seen by the operating system. So in this example, I have my client, my Signal client, right? It pings a server. It talks to that server's secure enclave, right, which is using this hardware feature that Intel introduced called SGX, right? And all of that communication, the public-private key exchange, the exchange of the encrypted blob, et cetera, happens without the operating system even being able to see that exchange. So outside the view of the OS. So they did a lot of work to make servers that do this. It's not easy to set up a server that has this kind of system. And basically, yeah, it is the public-private key pair kind of exchange that we're used to. I don't know if it would be helpful to talk about that for your audience, but it does it in such a way that's supposed to sandbox it from the rest of the operating system.
Okay.
So hypothetically, it could store everything about your phone if the encryption actually works, right? But then there's always questions of implementation. There's always questions of, bugs and exploits and that sort of thing. And SGX has had some breaches in the past that we can talk about.
But and that's kind of brings it down to me. If this were something that's like, hey, we have this new feature, you can turn it on or turn it off, I'm okay with it. But to say, hey, we're doing this, I don't want that type of stuff in the cloud's data. I'm happy setting everything up from scratch every single time. Not everybody is. I get that I'm unique in that manner, but now they're talking about these being pins, but in reality, it's a password. It's not just numbers. 4 is the minimum. It goes up to as much as you want. Now, the thing that caused a lot of people some annoyance is that they will continuously ping you at 12 hours, at 1 day, at 3 days, at 7 days, and at 14 days, so that you, quote, don't forget your PIN. Well, what if I'm using something that I'm not going to forget? Like, stop annoying me. That's one of the complaints a lot of people have, that the space repetition. And after 14 days, if you never see it again for the next 2 years, you're not going to remember it anyway in 2 years if it's not something that's there. And then, of course, we get this type of speech here that when I start seeing this speech, my red flags start going, what's going on? Can I turn these off? It's important to memorize your PIN, and reminders cannot be disabled. We cannot recover your PIN if you forget it. You will see reminders less frequently if you consistently enter your PIN correctly.
Yeah, so this kind of user, UX problem, right? User experience problem. I totally agree with you. I think that's their way of trying to get around a problem that a lot of the cryptocurrency providers currently have, where basically you set up an account once, it gives you a phrase, right? It's usually like, 12 or 16, whatever it is, random words. If you lose that, you're screwed. And I think, especially because they have such a small staff, they probably are trying to get around having a lot of support issues with that. I don't know if pinging people over a 14-day period is going to solve that problem. I kind of doubt it, and I kind of think it's going to annoy people rather than help. So I do agree with you there.
It will help you remember it for the short term, in my opinion. But if it stops after 14 days, you don't have to enter it again for the next 2 years, and you change devices in 2 years, like, I don't remember what that is.
Yeah, right.
So, I don't know. That's a thought. This, of course, has been received with mixed thoughts. Some people really love it. Some people really hate it. So I'm going on to Google Play here. I'll make sure we're still on the straight screen. Okay, we're going on to Google Play here. You see some people like, I don't want or need a PIN. Don't need anything in the cloud either. Signal still is a problem. Not receiving messages, things like that. Some people, it's like, hey, I'm okay with this. Great privacy out. Just wish there were better group conversations. So... obviously it's not perfect. Some people don't like it, but as you flip through these in the more recent comments since the last updates, I like and appreciate security features. It's better in WhatsApp. The only grave privacy concerns, weakness, the fact that this app is linked to your phone number. So, of course, I definitely do not like the forced PIN prompt. Should allow you to opt out by choice. Another thing highly annoying is the bubble reminder for the username. Again, where's the option to turn it off? So it's 50-50. Half people like it and understand the direction they're going. Half people don't. Now, Sean, from the security perspective, security, privacy, is this good for security, privacy perspective?
Okay, so let's do a quick overview again of the enclave, because I didn't really do a great description of that. So So public-private key encryption, right? Public key is the one that you usually share with the world and say, or at least friendly people, right? Trustworthy people. And you say, hey, here's my public key. Use this key to encrypt stuff, right? And then you keep your private key and you never give that to anybody, hypothetically,
Yeah.
to decrypt stuff, right? What the enclave does is it generates one of those key pairs on the server and it uses the public key, it ties that to your PIN, right? So the whole PIN system, again, is a public-private key exchange. Hypothetically, the CPU decrypts the code, right, and sends you that output without the server that secure enclave is on even knowing. The main issue is that we've seen, from my perspective, we've seen low-level hardware exploits in the past that have taken advantage of these kinds of secure enclave systems. So Intel SGX was developed primarily so that an exchange like this could happen for content, for DRM, right? So that, for example, you pay a service provider, let's say a Netflix or whoever, I don't know who's actually using it, but you pay some sort of provider, you get a video stream, and your operating system isn't privy to the data except in an encrypted form, right? So then you can't do things like, save that stream to a file and pirate it, or at least it's very difficult to do these things, right? That's the idea of these enclaves. And in the past, SGX has had a breach. They had a breach that was very similar to Meltdown and Spectre, if you remember those, speculative execution attacks. So these are low-level hardware attacks that also your operating system doesn't know about, right? So if you're an admin running a server for Open Whisper Systems / Signal, and it's using these secure enclaves, you potentially could have an exploit on that system without even being aware of it. Even if you're a very good sysadmin, you're trying to be ultra secure. And my fear actually is that nation states are going to take advantage of this. Supply chain vulnerabilities in hardware are a big deal and will become a bigger deal, I think, in the world after the pandemic. And I don't necessarily trust that something that is so closely tied to a hardware implementation is not going to have an exploit that can get around it.
Okay. So it's reasonably, but not entirely, for the most part.
Well, so I actually trust similar concepts that aren't at the hardware layer a little more.
Yeah.
See, because from a hypothetical standpoint, doing this on the hardware layer makes a lot of sense, and keeping it out of the purview of the operating system reduces the attack surface, right?
So you're not for that for the it was a video game. Is it an anti-cheat system that runs at the kernel level? Last week. Don't do that.
but so the point is, it would be great if we could trust our hardware, but hardware is one of the areas where we have very little trust or very little understanding of where it's even coming from. And traditionally, nation state actors have really taken advantage of this. So I almost trust systems that are up higher in the stack, or at least the kernel layer, right, or the operating system layer, doing these things. It is a little worrisome to me from that perspective. I don't know if it's any more worrisome than some of the other things Signal is doing or has done. I mean, I think the trust level and the threat model, so to speak, is similar to what most people use Signal for. But it may mean that if you became, the next Edward Snowden, right, you might want to use something else. That's all.
So this is something that just came into my head as you were saying all that. With this new change, does this not make it easier for Signal to have a vulnerability that would release your metadata over what it has been before they implemented this system?
I don't see any reason to think that, no.
I'm just curious because if they're storing your contacts and group chats on a server, even if it's encrypted, that's a little bit better than just on your device. That's why I thought of that.
Yeah, well, so I guess from a sense you could say that. So let's outline two attacks, right? So the first one is, like I said, a speculative execution attack on the hardware. It gets into that secure enclave. Whatever you have in there gets pwned, right, and gets leaked.
Sure. Okay.
Then you're right in that case that your metadata, et cetera, would be out there. But keep in mind, we're already trusting a lot of that information to the double ratchet encryption protocol that Signal's using.
All right.
And we're already trusting that that's being implemented on the server end outside of our view in a trustworthy way. And there's no reason that that also couldn't have an exploit on that end. It's just we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Open Whisper Systems seems to be a trustworthy actor.
Yeah.
But the main issue is obviously they're centralized, right? It's a centralized system. You know, and it's not going to change. It's not going to get decentralized overnight. That's for sure. So
Yeah. I mean, and my concern about any time you're moving stuff onto a company server, even if the company itself is trustworthy, we could have a bad actor inside the company, and that's certainly a concern.
it's. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Anything else on there? We can
Well, I
jump
was
over
going to say,
to the
I was going to
sauciness
say
of
real
Reddit.
quick. So that is a high bar, and this is the kind of thing I've been trying to do with Privacy Safe, 3N Web. We've been working with. We want to have a syncing system that is optional, right? You don't have to use it, but if people decide to sync with our system, yeah, there is a certain amount of trust they're placing in us as a provider.
And
yep,
you guys are providing that in Privacy Safe, right? If I understand, the option to sync, the option to not.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the syncing, we don't even push for. So in other words, you can have two privacy safe devices or a laptop and a privacy safe, and you don't have to ever talk to any server that I touch. So,
Okay.
Yeah. And the second thing I just want to point out, so if folks are interested in the real details of the Secure Enclave, there's a group out there called Kudelski, Kudelski Security, that did a good write-up of this, and SGX, I want to say 4 years ago at Black Hat. Most of what they talked about applies to this system that Signal is implementing. So
Cool. Very good. Awesome. Let's look at the sauciness of Reddit for real quick, just because it's always fun. So this guy requires the pin creation of a pin deterring users. So I've gotten some people I know start using Signal, but because of this requirement to create a pin, now they're considering going back to their previous SMS app. Signal was initially attractive to me because it was so easy to get someone on board, but requiring users to create a pin no longer cause hesitancy for new users. Seems to me this should be optional. Anyone's having the same experience. Do you have any reactions to that?
Yeah, so it's so much bigger than it was when it first started. I think the network effect is going to keep Signal being the go-to solution. I mean, even me, when I have to talk to somebody and I know they don't have any other understanding of end-to-end encryption at all, I say, well, do you have Signal, right? That's not going to change just because of the PIN system.
Yeah.
So I'm not that worried that's going to scare people away.
Okay. All right. Let's see. 3 of my Signal contacts stopped working. Can text call outside the app confirm both apps are working? Connected. Okay, I don't know if that's. I thought I grabbed something more relevant to what we were talking about. Anyway, let's go ahead. I don't think there's anything in the life hack or just how to set up your PIN, things like that. So let's go pivot here and go back to chatting about alternatives. If this is a direction you don't like, and I'm leaning towards probably maybe I'll keep Signal around. But I had a problem with if I keep Signal around, it's not default, and somebody texts me who has Signal, I don't get the message, and that's a problem. So I might actually have to completely deregister it at least. But anyway, what are other alternatives out there?
Yeah, and just real quick, I would agree with you. You're pretty much very likely to have to keep Signal around just because of the amount of people using it. Folks who are really worried about this, maybe use Signal Desktop so you can have text conversations, and maybe you figure out how to have a call over something else. Then you don't have to have it on your phone necessarily, right?
Well, to my understanding, though, if I have Signal on the desktop, it still has to be registered through the phone, right?
It does have to be registered that first time, yeah. But if you then just uninstall it or something, you don't need to run Signal on the device, right? It's that initial registering. It's going to be that initial keeping track of the PIN. You know what's going to happen in practice, right? These pins are going to be lost. These pins are, et cetera. So it's going to be interesting. I would not be surprised if when they move to storing the address book in this secure enclave, they then introduce usernames, right? As quickly as possible, because people are going to have to burn accounts and create new ones if they lose their PIN, right?
That's I think what's behind this big push to add a username, which I'm sorry, I'm refusing. Somebody says Jammy. So asks about Jammy. Do you know about that one?
Sure. So Jammy used to be called GNU Ring. That's a SIP app, basically, VoIP, voice over IP calling. I've had reasonable success with it. Just like any of these systems, you need to have other people using it. So my primary issue with this, and even when Signal first came out, I was doing workshops at universities and showing people how to use this stuff. I couldn't even get people to use Signal back then, right? And I would say, well, there's something called Signal, and there's something called Wire, and there's this thing called Jabber, right? XMPP, and showing people how to do stuff. So I do like Jammy. I think it obviously it had a big push from the GNU FSF folks, and that's great and a good sign that it's got good community values and visibility. But until a lot of people start using it, I probably won't unless somebody requires me to.
Sure. Okay.
And how many apps are we going to have in our basket of apps? I don't know.
It's becoming like the streaming services, You can't just have Netflix anymore. It's got to be, one for each individual network you want to watch. It's becoming nonsense. And I'm the same way. When I start to see that type of pushback, I'm just going to withdraw a lot and just not have any, You want to reach me, write me a letter, Email's good. So anyway, so what are the other options that you would look at?
Sure. So I mentioned Wire. There's some criticisms about Wire. They do have a directory system, like I said. Hypothetically, it's trustworthy. They're doing pretty basic, almost a TLS style handshake to store that information. But otherwise, it's like Signal. It does have video calling. It works really well, and you can just create a username, so you don't have to use the phone number. So that's usually the one I recommend for people who are, quote unquote, more mainstream, like not willing to dig or just not in that headspace yet. The one that I wanted to talk to you, Tom, about, because I think it's the best actual analog for Signal, is one that I actually hadn't used until yesterday for a long time. I just started using it yesterday for the first time in like 5 years almost. 5 years, 4 years. And it's called ConTalk with a K. Have you heard of this one? Or
I have not.
Okay, so ConTalk has been around for a while. It actually grew up around the same time period as Signal was gaining traction, and it's very Signal-like. It does use a phone number, right? It does also look in your address book, although my understanding is it doesn't try to ping everybody in your address book. But you can use something called JMP, right? JMP.chat. So you can use a phone number that's tied to a Jabber account, right? And then use that phone number with ConTalk. So now you've got a phone number that's not even necessarily your own phone number. It's tied to a Jabber account. And so basically you don't have to give away your real phone to use this thing. So it's actually kind of a good, if people are starting to get worried about their authentication details being leaked from, one of these other services, it's a good way to kind of protect yourself from that, is tying I don't want to say fake phone number, but a phone number that's not your traditional phone number that you would call people on the telephone with, to one of these apps. And ConTalk will let you do that. So that's pretty cool.
So would this allow me to do basically what I'm doing now? Like, I don't have an objection passing my real phone number to a real friend. And if they don't use ConTalk and they send me a text message from their generic SMS, am I going to receive it? And if I send a message back, are they going to receive it? It's just going to be end-to-end encrypted if both of us are using it.
Yeah, so listen, it's an app, so they have to have the app, right?
Yeah.
And because it's using something called Jabber, it's probably going to appeal still to the more geeky folks who can understand that there's like an underlying thing, and so on.
Yes.
But I'd still recommend it for the geeks who are looking for something as a Signal replacement now. It seems like a project I'm happy it's still around. Like I said, I was expecting to actually go seek it out and it wouldn't be there. And it seems pretty solid. For the SMS problem, the thing that I do is, look, most of the people I'm going to talk to via text message are not going to use an encrypted app with me. So they're not even going to use Signal. And maybe that's just because, I don't know, the circles I'm in. But that thing I was talking about, silence, is still your best solution for having the best of both worlds, where you can have an encrypted chat message with somebody else who has silence.
Hmm.
But if nobody has silence, then you just send a normal plain text to them.
Yeah, I think silence is definitely the one that I should probably look at, just because most of the people I'm like right now, I have one group of friends that's becoming more privacy focused, and they're all switching over to Signal now. So now they're all on Signal, and I actually had very little to do with that. But now they're like the only people in my contact list that's actually using Signal, and now it's like I'm gonna jump ship, I think, from Signal. And
Yeah.
so with that, if silence though goes back and gives me basically what old Signal was, where I could do, if I got the friends that don't use anything, it sends them a regular one. If they do have it, then it works. Then that's probably what I might want to do. You said that's what silence dot as IM.
I am. Yep, I popped that in the chat. So that's a good one. But if you're interested in this, especially looking at F-Droid, you'll get a sense for what the terrain is. So you will see things like Jammy in there. You'll see Riot.im and some Matrix clients.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of interesting and awesome alternatives. Briar's another one that uses the Tor network actually on the back end. The issue we have is the network effect, right? Can we get enough people, even in our small social circle, using this stuff that we're going to be able to talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
If not, you end up
Yeah.
with just this huge list of apps on your phone that you don't use.
Yeah. And
So
and for me, I mean, I don't do enough communication with my phone. Like usually my texts are, "Hey, you home? I'm gonna swing by."
right,
I'll have the occasional client that will send me a password to a server in text messaging, but they're just using plain text anyways.
yeah.
So I don't know. That's useful information, and I'm not interested in any information from my Signal account. Maybe if Signal drops phone numbers entirely and goes exclusively user base with the phone number, without the phone number, user base with a PIN password. I would also see that viable, but as long as I have to provide them a PIN and give them a username and give them the phone number, I think I'm
It's
gonna
kind of a
step away
lot.
from Signal. I think
Yeah.
for a while, I think I'm just gonna drop Signal. So
Look, it's going to be a big test for them. So the other background to talk about this in, which I think is really important, and which the Signal folks themselves have highlighted, is the legal background that's changing in the United States.
mhm.
I know you do your privacy tinfoil hat thing,
Yeah.
so you're aware. But we've got this thing called Earn IT or Earn It coming through, right?
Hmm.
And this bill will remove some of the traditional protections that intermediaries, service providers have had from having to dig through their users' stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of interesting to me that the Signal folks would want to take on more of the burden of information about their users, storing it in this secure enclave, when that secure enclave is very likely to not only be targeted by intelligence agencies, et cetera, but also will be targeted by these laws.
Well,
Um,
if I've heard correctly, though, they said if it actually passes, they're going to move headquarters out of the United States. That's what I've
that's
heard.
that's what I've heard as well. But I mean, what are you going to do? Drop all your U.S. users too?
Well, I mean, I think you can keep using it. You're just in a different jurisdiction, but then you have the Cloud Act that
Right.
screws with you. So if you're unfamiliar with the Cloud Act, it basically says, hey, if you have customers, if you have customers in our country, our laws reign supreme, and we can go raid your servers over it. So
And I think Signal
basically,
understands that really the law would be more or less game over for them, unless there's a way to fight it after it's passed. But that's always terrible. So we need to try to,
yeah,
make sure that doesn't get passed, because
yeah.
it de facto will make sure that service providers have to moderate and look through all this stuff. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting. Let's have a look at some comments here, see if there's anything relevant that I missed, and then we'll jump in. Fortunately, there's not a ton of comments, so that's good. Jump off here in a few. Let's see, where was I at? KLX Linux is close to finishing Ubuntu Illumina. Very good. All right. Say that. I had no issues installing updates. Let's see. Reach just switched to Signal a couple weeks ago. Are you happy with the pins? Okay. First time I've seen without a polo. Yeah, I actually do have a variety of shirts so you can buy at shop.switchedtolinux.com. This is my sub to the cat, the human is crazy Switch to Linux shirt. So, it's getting too hot for the hoodie. So. All right. Okay. So is anything else? Gnostic. A lot of people do not read or understand BASIC. Yeah, that's true. I think most of these that we actually were relevant to the discussion, we actually did manage to get.
I see a few of them in here. Maybe it's just me. You're looking at the YouTube window, or?
Yeah. Go ahead and comment on anything you see.
So somebody asked a question about double ratchet algorithms, just some clarifying comments on that. Look it up, basically, because it's a bit much to describe, but it's a way of doing a key exchange without any intermediaries being able to see that key exchange and the information that you're passing. So basically all E2EE or real E2EE apps out there right now are using some variant of this. So looking at those concepts and understanding those concepts will give you a good grounding on how most of these apps actually work. And Open Whisper Systems was one of the pioneering, those folks, Moxie, Marlin, Spike, etc., have done a lot of the work there. Let's see, 5G rollout. Okay, so 5G is an update to the, obviously, the cellular system. Besides anything else you have to say about 5G, one of the things it is doing is concentrating power potentially in the hands of both telecoms and governments. So 5G base stations can be spread out in a neighborhood, and they're what they call splintered networks, meaning they themselves are kind of shut off from the other parts of the network. So if Huawei from China installs your 5G, then Huawei and whoever has access to Huawei's data, let's say the Chinese government, et cetera, are the ones who can surveil you, right? Mm-hmm. If the United States does it through some company, well, then it's the United States surveilling you.
5G is just terrifying.
Yeah. So it's problematic. So at any rate, where this is concerned, where messengers are concerned, the problem for those is actually going to be, I think, on the user, app layer, right? Mm-hmm. We already have incompatibilities being introduced into text messaging and calling already, where iOS will introduce some multimedia features that only iPhone users can use. Google's looking at doing some of these things. All of these messengers that we're talking about are based on free and open source software at some level. They used to be using protocols like XMPP, the one I was calling Jabber. Some of them still use that, or use that in combination with something called WebRTC, right, for the video and the audio portion, et cetera, et cetera. These are standards. When we start losing these standards, right, we're going to start losing access to, these third-party apps, basically. Yeah. They're going to become even more obscure. They're going to become even less useful, et cetera. And if SMS and multimedia messaging, MMS, especially, if that's changed along with 5G, and it looks like it's going to go in a pretty bad direction, then great. You'll have all these apps that you potentially can send encrypted information with them if they have the app on their end. But even if they have the app on their end, you may be cut off from their phone for some reason because the iOS has decided that that kind of MMS message can't be sent over, correct, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where 5G is going to be problematic in this way. It's going to be at the application layer, I think.
Yeah. So Reach says, wouldn't it be possible to ditch your phone number in Signal and use a username? Not yet that I know of. When Signal gets to the point where I can use it on a username base only and it behaves more like Telegram in that respect, I would have no problem with it. But the fact that they want me to create a PIN to store stuff in a cloud account of some kind and have the phone number and have a username, that becomes a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, and so just to remind, because I think some of the confusion in that question is actually about, what's wrong, what's the difference between a username and a phone number.
Yeah.
remember, Signal was only looking in your address book on your device for phone numbers, right? And then reaching
Mm-hmm.
out to those people on sort of a per contact basis when you try to talk to them. That's a very different thing than storing information somewhere as the intermediary, which would be required in some way if you're using a username, right?
Yeah.
And that's why the secure enclave is a very cool and awesome way of doing this, right? But it still relies on a certain amount of trust in the implementation. So it is shifting the trust model and saying, I have to trust Signal with even more of my
Mm-hmm.
information,
Yeah.
et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you start requiring me to couple a phone number with any security implementation, I'm squirrely. Too easy to steal phone numbers. Now, to Signal's defense, this method will make stealing somebody's phone number almost impossible to steal your Signal information as well. So there's good elements to what they're doing. I
Right.
don't want to paint this as entirely bad. It just has deviated from what I have used Signal as a tool for, and so it ceases to be a useful tool for me at the present. Keith Richardson says Briar over Silence. Pros, cons. How's Briar
Yeah.
work?
I mean, so that's great. Yeah, you can do that. So basically, you can pair the two apps together. So what you're doing is basically having a Tor tunnel that's sending the SMS.
Mm-hmm.
Briar is basically Jabber over Tor, I guess
Oh,
you
okay.
could call
All
it.
right. Okay.
Um, and that app's really awesome. It's grown up very quickly in the last couple of years. So yeah, pairing it with something
Yeah.
like Silence would obviously be a good idea. Um, in this way, if you're going to try to defend yourself, learning a basket of tools is good because you can
Mm-hmm.
start doing that, like combining them. Um, and so I don't mean to like demean or say you shouldn't learn a lot of tools. It's not good to know a lot of apps. The
Mm-hmm.
problem becomes when you're trying to talk to somebody for the first time, saying to them, "Hey, this is how you talk to me."
Yeah.
That's where things get to be a problem
Yeah.
or difficult.
Options, I guess. All
Yeah.
right, I think that's kind of the bottom of the comments, unless we want to dive into like the Zoom. Work wanted me to join a Zoom meeting for training now. Okay, well, let me address that real quick, Shadow. I've been telling people if you want me to connect with you on Zoom, I don't have a problem, but I'm not creating a Zoom account and hosting a meeting. Fair enough. you know, I wouldn't have any quabbles about using Zoom. It's just when they say you need to create a Zoom account, no.
Yeah, so Zoom is going to be an interesting player here because the acquisition of Keybase is going to change that product pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't doubt that they'll be able to do some sort of, trustworthy encryption. The question is whether then you put your trust in them as a company to do that correctly
Correct.
going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. All right. Final thoughts.
Sure. So again, just to keep pushing on the standards thing, one of the things I'd like to see a little more out of Signal and OWS, I actually don't think this is necessarily a huge problem. This pin thing, I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like you said, there's some pros and cons there. The two areas that are problematic to me are non-standardization. Right? We do have some standardized, or at least talks about standardization in the E2EE space. One of them is the MLS working group that the IETF has right now, messaging layer security. They've got Google, Mozilla, Wire, Twitter, Cisco, maybe other companies working to talk about, hey, how can we do E2EE with a real standard and have some interoperability? So
Mm-hmm.
not having that and having these features introduced from an interop standpoint actually concerns me more than the potential security issues. Because I think to date, Signal has done a great job with the security.
Mm-hmm.
And two, well, this hardware feature tying the secure enclave to the hardware actually worries me because of the potential for supply chain exploits, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not saying anything bad about the Signal devs, but these things could come in forms that are completely out of their control. So they get some server farm somewhere, and the devices are pwned, but via targeted surveillance, targeted attacks from some three-letter agency. That's the kind of thing that I'm not sure they're going to be able to defend against. So,
Yeah, I understand that. That's interesting. Yeah. My thoughts, I guess my final thoughts. Yeah, I think for now I probably need to jump off of Signal for a bit, see where it goes and things. But that's that. So for whatever it is. So those are our thoughts. You can let us know your thoughts, everybody else, in the comments when we are done. So, with all that, we'll wrap this one up. So thanks for hanging out, everyone.